I made my best friend out of mud, and she became a monster. Every kid, in every grade of every school, knew there was always that one kid, the one who wanted to have friends, rather to have at least one. Someone to have your back, no matter what. Someone to do things with, like play Power Rangers with you on the jungle gym at recess. That kid who, no matter what, just can't ever appeal to anyone enough to be worth their time talking to or playing with. The black sheep, I believe it's called. Well, that was me growing up. The black sheep. Though I would be a lot more honest to say I was the king of black sheeps. That's right, even guys like Frankie Todd. That's Frankie Todd, Todd, who just couldn't go a single day without getting wedged, Indian red burned, and or straight up getting a mud hole stumped into his pudgy ass on the playground by the 5th graders wanted to play or hang around with me. I guess I couldn't really blame them. Truly, I couldn't really blame them. Long story short, it would have been the understatement of the century to say that I didn't fit in. For starters, where all the other kids were all talking about how they stayed up late at night, eating junk food and watching R-rated movies, or how their parents would let them play rated M games, cool stuff, I was the one who was only allowed 2 hours a day on electronics. And of course, God banished the thought of my mom allowing me anywhere near that stuff back then. Basically, if anything was any worse than PG-13. And even then, there were severe limits. Then I was kept as far away as possible from it. Now, understand that I am not angry at my folks or anything. Overbearing a bit, sure, but it wasn't without reason. That one reason being that they fear I would end up in jail like my brother, sentenced to 20 years for armed robbery. Ronnie used to play GTA too, they would always say, every time I used to ask why they were so against it. Look at him now. Ma would go on about how it was all that garbage that led him to where he was now. Being young and perhaps too naive for my own good, I believed her. I didn't understand how the logic worked, but I didn't try pushing it either. So, while other kids were talking about GTA or Call of Duty, some even acting out there on the playground, I was acting out my childhood favorite show, Power Rangers. I was always running around by myself, punching and kicking at the air, fighting imaginary party patrollers, while the rest of them looked at me condescendingly. At lunch, I always sat at the far end of the table, alone, where other boys my age were talking to each other about how they wrecked each other at that new video game, or were talking about their favorite gory scene in a movie. I was alone, simply either reading one of my comics or drawing a scene from Power Rangers. Needless to say, I was of course harassed every single day, usually being called Sissy or Mama's little bitch boy. That was a favorite of theirs. On a normal day, I was shoved into the wall, mocked endlessly on sight, had hornets flung at me in class, and I would end up with most of my drawings torn up. If I was especially unlucky, I would also get cornered and robbed by a group of upperclassmen in the lunchroom, and or have the absolute hell beat out of me with sticks at recess. This particular abuse was carried out by the 3 worst offenders: Blake Kinnaman and his 2 cronies, Trenton Isaacs and Walter Voss. That's Blake Kinnaman, Kinnamon, Trenton Isaacs, Trenton Isaacs, and Walter Voss. That's Walter Voss, WalterVoss. Like I said, nobody really liked me, but these three essentially got their rocks off to torturing me. There wasn't a single other kid I saw that they took more pleasure in harassing than me. And of course, being the little Boy Scout I was, I didn't exactly try teaching them a lesson or anything like that. No, I always ran to the teachers for help, which only served to further piss them off. Something I learned the hard way after they were sentenced at one point to 5 days of after-school detention, to which I was paid back in full with them jumping on me on the playground, throwing me to the ground, and kicking the crap out of me while I was down. Oh, and I forgot to add, no one was ever willing to come to my defense either. Why would they? Why bother helping me? I was the lame, weird kid. Remember? Mama's little bitch boy. Anyway, in spite of this, I learned how to get used to it. I didn't change who I was to fit in. Instead, anytime I wanted to try and make friends or engage with others, I would just stick to what I liked, what I was interested in. In short, it was just me. I was me, and that wouldn't change just to make others want to hang out with me. That said, though, it did start to get lonely after a while. It'd be nice, I thought, to have at least one friend, one person to play with me. Someone who would actually be interested in the same things I was. I would be lying if I said that didn't start to really make my 4th grade days a lot less enjoyable. That's where she had first come into the picture. Jen. 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 She was the first real best friend I ever made, as well as the biggest mistake I ever made. A mistake that may now cost me dearly. It was a Friday, and it was one of the unlucky days, as I mentioned earlier. I was curling a ball, trying pathetically to shield my face as best as I could, while getting beaten on all sides like a damn piñata by the 3 of them. I think it was because I apparently didn't have as much money on me that day as he was requiring from me when he shook me down. By the time they were done with me, I was quivering on the ground, covered in welts and bruises. About 10 minutes or so passed by with me just laying in the dirt like that, not sure I even wanted to get back up. Eventually though, the bell rang, signaling us to head to our last class of the day. I finally managed to pick myself back up and trudge back into the school building when my last period teacher asked what had happened to me. I didn't say anything. I'm pretty sure she knew though. Regardless of that, she sent me to the nurse's office, where I ended up spending the remainder of the day. The nurse had been, by then, somewhat used to me having to make visits to her office because of my injuries at their hands. She used to tell me to stay as far away from them as possible, and I told her that I always tried to, which I did, but they always found me anyway, just to beat me up and harass me. After she was done bandaging me up, she gave me a cherry-flavored dum-dum and let me sit in her office until the dismissal bell rang, where I would ride my bus home. On the bus, I spent my time drawing my favorite characters from my Power Ranger comic. I remember one of the pages showing Rita Repulsa making one of her monsters come to life using clay. It was then that an idea came to me. This was when an idea came to me. What if I could do that? What if I could make a friend out of clay? They would always be my friend, no matter what. They would like me, and they would like the same stuff as me. And best of all, they would be there to help me stand up to Blake and the others. Look! Call me what you want. Desperate, foolish, stupid, or straight up psychotic. But I was damn near willing to sell my soul by then, just to have someone as a friend. When I got home that day, I decided to try it for myself, because it was a Friday night, and I knew that my folks would be working late, leaving me alone until at least 9 or 10:30, when my mom would get home. Funny enough, they always trusted me to have the house to myself for a few hours, as well as trusting that I would be in bed when they would come home. This meant that I didn't have to worry about them interfering with my sorcery, something my devout Christian mother had absolutely no tolerance for. I went outside with one of Mom's gardening towels and I began chipping away at the dirt, piling as much of it as I could into my old sandcastle buckets from when I was 5. It wasn't easy either, because most of the ground wasn't your average dirt. Also, because we live in an old Catawba territory, most of the ground was red clay. This meant trying to dig through it was almost like trying to chip away at a stone block. It took hours, and by the time I had managed to fill up 3.5 of my 5 buckets, the sun had already begun to set. Quickly, I ran back inside and I hopped into the shower, stashing the buckets in my room. Afterwards, I changed into my pajamas and quickly wolfed down 2 pepperoni tortinos before heading back to my room to begin making my new best friend. I looked at the clock and I saw that it was already getting on 8:15. This meant I wouldn't have much time to pull my little scheme off, having to make sure I was in my bed by at least 9:15 to avoid Ma's wrath. Quickly, I dumped the clay into the middle of my bedroom floor and I began sculpting it into the shape of a person. After about 25 minutes, I had managed to mold the clay into the form of a girl, or at least the closest resemblance of a girl I could manage. Her face was square-shaped and blocky, with an equally block-shaped nose, and her eyes ended up being 2 large balls of the excess clay that wasn't used molding the rest of her. Her body was more or less the same, with it resembling a bulky sort of hourglass shape, and her hands and her feet were basically large bricks attached to the ends of long, white, rectangular limbs. I guess I thought it'd be the closest thing I would ever get to having an actual girlfriend. That, and I wanted to have a friend who could actually be the Pink Ranger when we played. Then, I set to spending the remainder of my time that night attempting to write a mix of crazy antics to try to make my creation come to life. This ranged from saying prayers to God, chanting aloud, "Magic wand, make my friend grow," and even using the old Boy Scout pocket knife I got back in 2nd grade to cut my hand and smear blood across its face. And, as you can imagine, none of these things worked. None of this worked. Regardless, I was too pig-headed to give up that easily. Unfortunately, in my determination, I forgotten to check the time, so you can imagine the absolute horror on my parents, especially my mother's face, when they came home that night to see me on the roof of the house, attempting to detach the TV antenna, thinking it was gonna Frankenstein my new friend to life. After a drawn-out ass-ripping, which ended in me being grounded for at least the next week, I trudged back upstairs to my room. When I was asked what in the name of God in heaven I was thinking, I didn't care or dare to tell them what I was actually trying to do. At best, she had been too livid to even pay much attention to what I told her, and she just think I was blowing smoke. At worst though, and probably much more likely, with my luck, she would have sacked my room, taking away and getting rid of anything that was even remotely not holy, and forcing me to read the Bible cover to cover every day. No. Instead, I just told her I was defending our house from the potty patrollers, and that the antenna was some sort of super weapon or something. Lame as hell, I know, but to my credit, she seemed to at least accept this enough to not try to press me for the truth. When I got back to my room, the lifeless mold still lay in the center of my floor. Some friend you are, I whispered bitterly. All I was wanting was a friend. Just one pal that would wanna play with me, who wouldn't make my everyday miserable at school. I was even willing to sell my goddamn soul for that. Yet, there I was, staring at an inanimate pile of mud on my bedroom floor. I literally couldn't even make a new friend if I tried. That's when my eyes started burning with tears of frustration, of hopelessness. For a moment, I just stood there like this, crying over the body mold, before delivering a swift kick to its rib and slopping into my bed defeated. I ended up quietly crying myself to sleep that night, but I was awakened only a few hours later to the sounds of thumping. It sounded like it was closed, whatever it was. I could hear it coming from across the room at my door. I had no flashlight, and I was still too tired to want to get up to turn off the light. As well as this, I noticed that it didn't really walk so much as sort of drag its feet along while barely lifting its feet. Because of this, I figured it was just that, heading to the bathroom for the 5th time, like usual, and went back to sleep. When I woke up in the next morning, I immediately noticed something was up. For starters, my door was now open, despite the fact that I knew damn well I'd shut it in the previous night. Then, looking down, I was hit by a tidal wave of shock when I saw that the clay mold wasn't in the middle of the floor anymore. I almost jumped out of my bed and began looking around my room. What the hell? Where the hell did it go? I was in a frenzy. What happened to it? I had left it right there in the middle of my bedroom floor. It's not like it just got up and walked away. Right? In my panic, I ended up glancing again at my open door. That was when I was able to notice the brown streaks leading out of the room and into the hallway. When I went into the hallway, I could see more of them track all the way to the stairs and down into the living room. It was while I was descending the stairs that I heard the sounds of thumping from the previous night coming from the kitchen. From about midway down the stairs, I was able to peer over the railing and into the dining room. I still couldn't see into the actual kitchen yet, but I saw the tracks leading into it. Suddenly, I heard another series of banging sounds. Hello? Mom? Dad? Is that you? There was no answer, only more banging sounds. Admittedly, part of me wondered how this hadn't already woke Mom and Dad up, given that their room was right next to the kitchen. I then saw that the room, too, was open, which told me that they must have gone out early to run errands or something. This sent me into goosebumps. If not Mom or Dad, then who the hell was in my house, tearing up the kitchen? When I was almost at the bottom of the stairs, I heard the dragon thumping again. I heard the dragon thumping sounds again, heading towards me from the kitchen. I slowly and quietly began backpedaling back up the stairs. as the thumb-dragging noise came closer and closer into the dining room, out of the kitchen. I'd almost made it back up to the stairs, enough to where I couldn't see out to the dining room anymore, when out from the kitchen, a large brown block emerged, followed by another. I knelt down, frozen, frightened, and very much confused. The two blocks moved forward again, and what I saw come into the dining room damn near made my heart stop dead. It was my creation, my new friend. She was alive. She was alive. But how? I wasn't sure what to do. I was still paralyzed with pure shock. Half of me wanted to dash the rest of the way screaming back to my room, while the other half wanted to rush down the stairs to her. I watched her enter the dining room and turn her head from side to side, scanning the room. Then she slowly trudged over to the table and reached out to grab the vase in the middle that Mom kept her peonies on. When she tried grabbing it though, her blocky hand instead ended up knocking it over into the floor, shattering it. She looked down as it just fell. She looked down at it and knelt down like she was gonna try picking up the pieces. Like before, though, she could only brush the broken shards with her hands. After about half a minute of this, my legs finally found some hidden strength or motivation to move again, and I was backing up the stairs again. At one point, I misstepped and slipped, letting out a startled yelp as I desperately seized the railing. That was when I saw her head immediately snap up to me, meeting me eye to eye for the first time. I think my heart actually did stop then, at least for a few drawn-out seconds. In that moment, I swear, time had actually stopped. Everything was supernaturally still and silent with me and her locked in a seemingly never-ending staring context. Then I watched her cock her head to the side, all Michael Myers style, like before, outstretching one of her brick hands out to me and using the other one to point to herself, specifically to her ribs. Hello? Hello? I couldn't think of anything else to say, or even do, for that matter. She just continued staring at me blankly. To say that I was lost would be a grievous understatement. I was beyond lost, to the point of being completely mind-fucked. Admittedly, the only thing keeping me from passing this whole thing off as probably my most bizarre dream ever was when I pinched myself hard enough to end up leaving a bruise. How was this possible? What happened? What happened? What was it that made her come to life? She cocked her head to the other side. She cocked her head to the other side before beginning to shamble towards the stairs. I didn't move, finding myself once again rooted to the spot on the stairs where I was. Eventually, she reached the bottom of the stairs and started up to me. A little ways up, she caught one of her feet on a step and stumbled down, continuing forward on her hands and knees. Finally, she reached me and outstretched one of her hands to me, sorta patting the top of my head. Pretty much without thinking, like a reflex almost, I shot up and bolted back to my room, slamming and using my body to block the door, despite what I said earlier. I was still in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be happening, I told myself. This isn't real. Come on, snap out of it. This snapped me out of my thoughts. From the other side, I could hear and feel the door budging outward against my body. What the hell? This time, the sound I could hear was very strong. I could hear the wood on the door starting to splinter against the hinges. It felt and sounded like who or whatever was trying to get through was using a battering ram against it. Another series of blows almost caused the door to break away completely. That was when I finally decided to open the door. I opened it to just a crack, just enough to peek out and see her standing there, holding up her boulder of a hand. For a moment she just stood there again, motionless and silent. What are you? I asked nervously, fully opening the door now, and she said nothing, only cocking her head to the side again and pointing one hand to me while touching her rib with the other. I opened the door the rest of the way. Her head straightened before outstretching both arms out to me. Before I knew it, her moist, dirt arms were wrapped around me, squeezing tighter and tighter. I realized when I felt myself being lifted off the ground and ragdolled like that I was a stuffed animal, that she was trying to give me a hug. Confused, frightened, and not at all aware of what I should have done next, I simply returned the hug as much as I could. Sure enough, this seemed to work and I was slowly getting back down. After taking a second to catch my breath, having damn near suffocated in her bear hug, I repeated my question, who are you? She just did the thing again, where she pointed one hand to me and the other to her rib. What? I don't understand. What are you trying to say? She stepped closer, touching my chest with her outstretched hand and tapping her rib with the other hand. I then felt a sharp kick to my right leg that felt like it had been hit with a sack of bricks. Ow! Ah! What the heck? I cried as I cradled my leg. She kept pointing to her ribs. Through the pain of my leg, something started to click in my head as to what she was trying to tell me. I realized that she wasn't just pointing to her ribs. She was pointing to where I kicked her last night before I went to bed. Was she trying to say that was how she was brought to life? How did me kicking her, out of all the other harebrained schemes I tried, manage to give her life? How? I don't understand. I created you. I created you? I said, more like an uneasy question than a statement. Her head straightened again and nodded before attempting to get me in another bear hug. I backed away, holding up my hands like a hostage and saying. She stopped and dropped her arms to her sides, staring at me. I stared back, not saying anything else. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I mean, how was this even real? I couldn't even begin processing how this was happening. Just a few hours ago, this thing was just a pile of mud on my bedroom floor. And now, after kicking her, of all things, here she was. What are you gonna do now? What are you gonna do now? I finally asked. She turned and walked back towards the kitchen where she came from. I finally found it in me to move again and followed after her. I was instantly paralyzed in horror again from what I saw. The entire kitchen was completely trashed. Everywhere, all over the floors, and across the counters were shards of glass, most of them being from either the jars of pickles from the fridge or from my folks' alcohol cabinet. As well as this, just about everything from the fridge had been scattered all across the floor and walls. Oh no, they're gonna kill me for this. What the hell did you do? She knelt down again and seemed to try picking up the pieces again. Like before, her brick-like, fingerless hands were only able to brush them over, even further crushing some of them. Stop! Stop! You're making it worse! Stop! You're making it worse! I exclaimed, rushing over to her, carefully trying to avoid the broken glass. I retrieved the broom and dustpan and set about sweeping up the mess my new friend had caused. She stood in the middle of the kitchen, watching me as I worked. This frustrated me immensely. Well, you gonna help or not? This is your mess. To this, she looked down and tried scooping up the glass again. To that I reply, never mind, I'll do it. You just stay there. I look around for a moment and told her to go outside or something. She immediately turned and shambled out of the kitchen, leaving a dirt trail behind her as she walked. Great. More I have to clean up before Mom and Dad see. When she reached the front door, I heard the thudding of her hands hitting the knob. Failing to grab it to turn, this caused me to have to stop and let her out before going back to cleaning up the mess. I'll say one thing right now. Red clay is a right pain in the ass to scrub off the floor, especially when it's tracked all across the house. Because of this, it took almost 2 hours just to clean up behind her. Finally though, I had managed to get most of that, as well as the broken glass picked up. More to my luck, Mom and Dad were still gone by that time too. I decided then to go outside to see if she was still around. At first, I thought she had actually run away, and I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to actually try to find her again. On one hand, she honestly gave me a bit of an unsettling feeling. I couldn't tell whether it was just still the bizarre nature of it all. The whole, holy shit, this thing is actually alive! Or the way she wouldn't speak or make a sound. But something was off nonetheless. At the same time though, I created her. And yes, she was supposed to be my friend. That's why in the end, I chose to look for her. Fortunately, she didn't actually require me to really look for her. I found her behind the house, knocking her hands against one of the trees in the backyard. She looked like she was trying to knock it down, as if out of frustration. Eventually, I noticed that this was a particular tree. And what was particular about it? It was splintering away. Eventually, I noticed that this particular tree was splintering away, even starting to tilt over a bit. This was bad news because this particular tree was located just a yard or two from the house. This meant if I didn't stop her, my house was gonna have a tree as a new resident. Stop! Stop! What are you doing? She froze, looking over to me. I ran over to her. I asked her again. What are you doing? She brought both of her blocky hands to her face, covering her eyes and running away. I realized she was crying. Wait! Where are you going? I called, following her. She stopped again and turned her head around to look behind her back to me. I caught up to her and I put a hand on her shoulder. Hey, don't cry. Hey, I'm sorry if I was mean to you. You just scare me a little bit. That's all. She turned around to face me. I put my hand out to her. I'm Alex, but my friends... Well, you can just call me Sander. Her head tilted down to look at my hand and back to me. She then outstretched her arms and seized me in another crushing bear hug. I returned the hug, demanding to be let go before being released again. Oh my god, you sure are strong, I remarked, chuckling nervously. What's your name? There was no answer from her. Instead, she tilted her head to the left and shook. No name, huh? That's when I decided I would give her a name myself. I started cycling through every girly sounding name in the book. Eventually, I just settled on one that sounded simple and easy to remember. How about Jennifer? Huh? Jen for short. That sound cool to you? She touched the slit I carved for her mouth before nodding. Oh, cool. Jen it is. She responded to this by putting her hands to B temples, mimicking a shock expression. So, what do you want to do now, Jen? She put her hand to her mouth again before walking to the tree again. She reared back, about to try hitting it, when I ran over and stopped her again. She looked at me, cocking her head in confusion. I got a better idea, I said. How about we play Power Rangers? I'll be the Red Ranger. You can be either the pink or the yellow one. Which one do you want? She stood motionless. Oh, right. Can't talk. How about you be pink? I asked her. She touched her mouth again before nodding. Awesome! Come on, it's morphing time! I shot my arms out and shouted, Tyrannosaurus at you, okay? I shot my arms out and I shouted, Tyrannosaurus! When I looked over to Jen, she wasn't moving. Well, aren't you gonna morph? She cocked her head, confused. I have forgotten that since she was still technically a newborn, I was gonna have to teach her stuff like how to play Power Rangers. I walked up to her and shot my arms again. See, you just go like this and shout the name of your sword. Yours is Saber-Tooth Tiger. She thrusted her arms out like mine. Yeah, that's it. Now come on, we have to stop the parties! And with that, I began punching and kicking the air wildly. At first, Jen just watched me before finally mimicking my movements, flailing her own arms in the air. For what felt like hours, we just ran around the yard together, fighting bad guys. I'll admit, it was actually kind of fun finally having another person to play with. Unfortunately, this was also where things first went haywire. I remember being in the heat of the battle when, from up the street, I could hear Blake and his two cronies hollering as they came down on their bikes. This caused me to actually piss myself in fear. In all my excitement, I've forgotten all about their little street sweep routine. This was almost ritualistic practice in which those three would bomb up and down the neighborhood on their bikes, stopping only when they saw an unlucky victim to pummel the absolute shit out of. They did it every weekend, usually changing the times with each occasion. In other words, us neighborhood kids can't keep track of when they would be coming every Saturday and Sunday afternoon. It would be completely random, out of the fucking blue, with the only warning to get safety being their shouts as they rode in. I myself had always been fortunate that I seemed to be able to dodge them. That said, I had seen just how viciously they would essentially brutalize some of the others who weren't so lucky. Let me put it this way. Remember the ways in which I described their abuses of me on the playground at school? Well, imagine that, plus a lot more because off school property, they would get away with it. And now, it looked like I was finally gonna have my own experience with it. As they got closer, yet not slowing down, I thought they might pass me by. Nope. As soon as they reached the edge of my front yard, they made sharp turns into my backyard, cutting me off and surrounded me. Haha! Well boys, look at what we got here! Blake said, with a wolfish grin full blast on his face. If it ain't mama, little bitch boy! Trenton replied from behind me. They hopped off their bikes and started towards me. I frantically threw my head in every direction, to no use. With Trenton, who towered above me, 6 feet tall, school football team star quarterback, Walter on my left, and Blake, who mind you was on a track team outside of school and was a black belt already in both karate and aikido. I was every flavor of Scrooge. Just as I was gonna try and make a break for it, I was grabbed from behind, my arms being tightly pinned backwards. Whoa there, Trenton chided. And just where the hell are you running off to, huh? Hell yeah! Why don't you stay a while? Huh? Walter added. He followed this with a swift hook to my gut that took the wind out of me. Oh, what's wrong, Ron? Huh? Don't wanna play? He hit me again, this time in the face. This one actually left me dazed for a moment. Haha, well boys, what do you think we should do with the trash here? Blake announced. Slowly, my head lolled around, looking for Jen. She was gone. Jen. Jen. I groaned. Blake up his hand to his ear. Huh? What was that? You gotta speak up. I don't speak little bitch boy language. Huh? What about you guys? He turned to the other two. They shrugged in response, giggling like crazy. Blake himself shrugged before swinging yet another blow to my stomach, this time forcing me to my knees. Trenton finally let me go, causing me to fall into a fetal position, clutching to my stomach. Trenton used this opportunity to kick me in the face. Instantly, my nose was busted wide open, and everything was a blurry. Oh my god, look, the little pussy went and pissed himself! Walter exclaimed. They all three busted out laughing. I was aching all over now, and was starting to feel myself slipping into unconsciousness. Where are you, Jen? Blake finally piped up again. I know. From now on your name is Pussy McPisspants. What do you think, huh? I didn't answer. Instead, my mouth hung slack and my head swam. Hey, what's wrong? You deaf and dumb too? He slapped me across the face, really hard. Oh, I get it. The little sissy's embarrassed, he said condescendingly. The other two giggled at this, while Blake jerked me up like a rag doll. I think we should help him. He nodded, and the other two walked up to me. I felt my pants be yanked down my ankles. Huh, there, problem solved. That was when I felt my eyes start to burn with tears. I couldn't help it. There I was, getting pushed around yet again, and yet again I was alone. Even Jen abandoned me. Are you fucking kidding with me right now? Are you seriously about to cry? He pinched the bridge of my nose, disgusted. Okay, you know what? Screw this. This is getting lame now. You two do something with this little shit. I'm out. I was grabbed by the other two and dragged over to one of the trees. Get the rope from the back, Walter ordered. I watched Trenton retrieve a rope from his backpack, and I tried to squirm free to no purpose. Walter hit me in the jaw again, knocking me dizzy, while Trenton hoisted and tied my wrist up to one of the lower hanging branches. I could feel the rope digging into the skin of my wrists, causing them, as well as the rest of my arms, to quickly go numb. I felt my shirt get yanked upward to expose my bare chest before the feeling of cold wet felt of a marker going across it. "And done. What do you think?" Walter declared. Blake and Trenton barked with laughter. "Let me see it real quick," Trenton said. I looked down to see what my chest now read, "Piss Pants," with an arrow pointing down to my stomach. I looked back to see Trenton approaching me with the marker, devious grin on his face, when suddenly he stops dead for just a foot or two away from me. "The hell? The hell? Who the hell are you?" His face was the dictionary definition of bewildered. I lolled my head as much as I could and tried to look behind me. I couldn't see much with the tree blocking most of my view, but from just out of the corner of my eye, I could see the vague outline of a short, reddish-brown person. "Jen," I groaned pitifully. "Oh, is this your girlfriend, Piss Pants? Whoa, gotta wonder how that happened," Blake scoffed. He then looked to her and started whistling and making lewd gestures towards her, humping the air and twitching his tongue between his index and middle fingers. "Hey, what's wrong with her? She don't like a good time? Huh, guess not if she's with a prissy little bitch boy like you." He scoffed again. He then threw his hand over a summoning motion, and the trio headed back to their bikes, speeding off. I was left tied to the tree branch. By then, my arms felt close to being ripped from their sockets. I didn't try struggling. Instead, opting to just hang there, weeping, I heard Jem walk up beside me. "How come you didn't help?" She cocked her head to the side in confusion, putting her hand to her mouth. I started yanking down on the branch until it snapped and I was finally freed. "You know what? Forget it! You're not a real friend! Go away! I don't want to see you anymore! I don't want to see you anymore!" I said it this time with venom. I meant it too. All of it. She slowly straightened again and stood still, staring at me. Well, get lost!" I shouted. I then turned and headed back inside, stealing one last glance over my shoulder. She just stood there. I went back inside and I cleaned myself up before slumping up to my room to wallow in my self-pity. At some point, I must have nodded off. I was awakened though when I heard the front door opening. I remember seeing flashlights from outside my bedroom window. When I shuffled downstairs to the living room, I remember seeing Mom and Dad standing at the door with 2 police officers on the porch. "Mom? Dad?" I said, snapping their attention towards me. I puked, and I could tell their faces were of great concern or worry. What's going on?" Dad quickly came over to me and led me back to my room. I wanted to go back down and keep pressing, but Dad's grip on my wrist was tight. Dad, what's wrong?" He didn't say anything, and when we got up to my room, he told me to stay put and that they would be up later and talk about it. His face looked petrified, almost like he was scared to look at me. "What happened?" Don't come until we come back, okay?" he said, his breath noticeably shaking. I was confused and scared at the same time. My brain was surfing through so many questions at that moment that I'm surprised I didn't drop into a panic attack. What was going on? Why were the police there? Why were they looking at me so weirdly? Did I do something wrong? I waited for what felt like forever until finally I heard the front door close downstairs, followed up with the flashing lights going away. That's when I heard them stomping up the stairs. Suddenly, my door was flung open and Mom and Dad stormed into my room, immediately seizing me into a tight embrace. Honey, how are you? Are you okay?" Mom asked me, her voice shaking. I just froze up. My heart was hammering 3 times as hard as normal. Mom, what's going on?" She looked to Dad and then back to me. The Dad was the one to speak first. Son, were you outside this afternoon? I nodded with my head. What happened? I told them that I was just outside playing like usual. Then, I of course didn't mention the whole Jen thing. He then asked me if anything happened to me while I was outside, if I saw or spoke to anyone else while I was out there. I shook my head. No. Are you sure? 'Cause the police said that they saw you outside with the boys from up the street. Oh, I said timidly. Yeah, Blake. So, did you invite Blake to come over? I shook my head wildly. You sure? Yeah, he and his buddies always ride down the streets. And what were you and Blake doing? Was he nice to you? I sank further into Mom's arms. I shook my head, telling them about the ways he harasses me at school. I felt Mom's arms tightening around me. Have you been telling your teachers? Yeah, but that only made them more angry at me. I see, my dad replied. He sighed. He took a deep breath and said, Now, son, I want you to be completely honest with me. Did you ever try to get back at them for what they did to you? I shook my head. Are you sure? You know it's better to come clean about stuff like this. I promise, Dad. I've never tried to fight Blake or anybody. I was now the most confused I'd ever been up to that point. Besides, of course that morning, seeing Jen for the first time. What's going on? Am I in trouble? Dad ruffled my hair with half a smile. No, you're not in trouble, but we'd like you to stay indoors for a while. Until this mess blows over. I cocked my eyebrow at him. Mess? I was starting to get irritated with Dad's beating around the bush. He said again, nothing. He just sighed and said that Blake's house had just been broken into and that someone had attacked the family. He said that the paramedics were even called out there. My eyes went wide, color draining from my face. As big as Blake himself was, not to mention that his dad was a former Marine, to hear that they'd been attacked and hospitalized was horrifying. Who could have done this, and why? Don't get me wrong, I wasn't a fan of the kid, obviously, but I didn't want to see him hurt, or worse either. Call me a softie, weakling, whatever. I was always that type of kid that would rather keep feebly trying to make peace with you rather than getting payback, you know? At least, not like this. So who... we don't know yet, son. That's why we would like you to stay inside for a while, okay? Just until they find who did this. Then, they left the room, leaving me on my bed. Needless to say, sleep wasn't an option that night. I stayed wide-eyed the entire night, imagining what sort of brute attacked the Kinnemans and why. Worse was the question of what would happen to me. Was I next?